taking.
Welcome to 1632 Writing What We Want. This is the follow-up panelist at 2 o'clock. 1632 Reading What You Want. Yep, start that. Yep. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right, I'm Chuck Thompson, one of the editors and owners of 1632 and Beyond, the short story venue for 1632 stories, and I've also authored a few stories that appear in the Gazette and now 1632 and Beyond, and a couple other places, not 1632 stories.
I'm Gorg Huff. I write in the 1632 universes and a few others. And
Bjorn Hasseler. I edit the 1632 Beyond, and I write Northstar's European Security Services as well as the Bible Society stories.
Okay, I'd like to correct something there. Bjorn says, I edit. He's the editor-in-chief. He also chooses all the stories and that go in there. So he does more than a little editing. And Bjorn, Chuck, and I are the ones that own the magazine. And I also write and edit. And one of the things I do the website, a bunch of other ancillary stuff, but I've been making the swag we get here. And so if you guys have any thoughts or ideas on, and we're trying to figure out what people might like. So if you have any thoughts and ideas, if you like the stuff that's here this weekend, if there's something else you think is better, just let me know.
I've heard t-shirts. Something else t-shirts. Yeah, no? Yeah.
So t-shirts are an expensive giveaway though, right?
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
Giveaway.
So, with what we're looking for, the number one thing we're looking for is writers. How many of you have read fairly extensively the series? Okay. Less extensively? One or two? Haven't read any? Okay. When I first wandered into Bane's bar, I was like, cool, they're talking about the series. And I'm like, oh no, they're not. They're writing the series. This is a really cool behind the scenes look at what's going on. And we encourage new writers. The 1632 series, when you include Graphic Gazette, 1632 and beyond, we've had about 200 authors. For at least 3/4 of us, it was our first professional sale. Some people have gone on to like solid mid-list status, and there are coming out books one after another, like Gorg. And most of us did not have too much of an idea of what we were doing when we first got involved. So, if you have a story in mind, you can write it. We can help you make sure it fits in the universe. You can publish it. We can pay you money for it. Right now, the 1632 and Beyond is a relatively new magazine. We're doing quite well, better than we expected at this point. We are paying 5 cents a word, and we take stories up to 17,500 units. So what is considered short stories or novelettes within the science fiction and fantasy communities. And right now we can do 1632 stories, we can do Time Spike stories, which was the second of the ACD shards. We can do Alexander the American stories, which was the fourth, chronologically speaking, of the ACD shards.
are you going to be able to do the crossing?
That's a little bit of a special case,
Okay.
and we need to see.
Yeah, I wasn't asking for myself.
Yeah, we need to see exactly how much room Kevin needs to get stuff done before we can talk about whether that opens up.
We're actively looking at that, yeah.
Yes.
The Alexander Inheritance and Time Spike have both been out for a while, and so there's been time to make sure what the original authors wanted. That's definitely not ruling anything out for the crossing. That's just saying there be.
So,
What about the angel?
Peterbilt?
Peterbilt, yeah.
It's really up to Lou, but so far as I'm concerned, basically, it's, if you guys want to do something in Peterbilt, yeah, let me have a look at it, but yeah.
just from a strictly grubbing money standpoint, we'll probably let Bain come back with it at least, one royalty period before, before we ask for any call for permission on that. Because we don't want to block out anybody saying, hey guys, that was awesome, do another right now.
Bane is very much where novels go at this point, and we are where short stories go. And Bane's a little bit bigger than we are, so, and Bane has been awesome with us.
Yeah.
But, let's be real quick, we're not going to argue with them. I can't see anything coming that there would be a reason to argue with them on, but we're very much working with and not against Bane, and so there are things where we simply have to wait. Bane also simply has to wait. We'll see how things go.
So if you can write a letter to a friend or a family member, then to me, you can write a story. If you're shy about putting it on the bar, you can send it directly to Bjorn or me. If you just have an idea and you want some input, any of us would be happy to look at your idea and suggest ways to move forward. I think almost anybody can write a story.
The only stories I have seen be completely shot down, and let's be clear, there is at this point one person who can give you a hard no and that story will never move forward, and that's Bjorn, right, as the editor-in-chief. But the ones I have seen get a hard this is not happening are ones where it completely upends the universe in some way. Suddenly Mike Stearns decides he wants to be an actual literal
King.
prince, king, and now he's going to be the king of something. No, that's not who he is. Or, the USC is suddenly like, well, we could make a little more money if we had slavery. No! So as long as you know the universe and you're playing the roles, you're probably going to come up with an idea.
You guys also do nonfiction stuff.
Yes.
Wow. Is that are you looking for that, or are you looking for more fiction?
We have in the magazine, we start out with Magdeburg Messenger section, and that is the 1632 fiction stories. And that's going to probably always be the biggest section. And then we've got the State Library white papers, and that's nonfiction. And then we've got the ACD shards for Time Spike and Alexander Harrigan's stories, and maybe more as things go on.
I think with nonfiction, I have a question for you all. With the nonfiction, our goal is to have Magdeburg Messenger fiction, and then to have a CD shards or the nonfiction, one or the other, in every issue. Do you read the nonfiction, and raise your hand if you actually read the nonfiction? Okay, so about half.
At least
You scan it.
skim.
You skim
it.
I know
Okay.
exactly what it is.
So, but there's not, it's not like the fiction where you read all of it all the time, in general, correct?
No.
And it's more of a skim than a real read through.
Now, a lot of that is because I don't understand some of the
So
technology.
a lot of, there are too much quote-unquote white papers that go into the technical detail that make it
Yeah.
something you're not excited and enthusiastic about reading. So ones that are higher level are of more interest. And ones, and I will ask, something that brings more of the in-universe in George Grant had something about,
Yeah,
Farm
farm
equipment,
equipment
and
came
it-
through the ring of fire.
it came through the Ring of Fire, and then talking about what was available in Mannington and what he saw in the Real World Museum. Is
Now,
that
that was
something?
very interesting.
Okay, so those are the kind that are more of interest.
Well, like Casper here is a historian of the Ottoman Empire. If he were to write a backgrounder on the Ottoman Empire at some point, that's something I would read. Whereas I probably wouldn't read something on guns or the technical manual type stuff that
We look forward to your story, Casper.
Oh, I didn't. Anytime, Casper.
I threw him, I had already told him about that at a previous conference.
Yeah, I mean-
The petition played something.
Way back when, in your previous magazine, the Grand Book was that, there was an article about dyes. Sorry, I didn't understand a third of what was,
Or the one
because I
that,
don't have a chemistry background at all.
Yes, and you're,
yes, I think some of those things were written for other authors, and it's really essential. Yeah, I like the stuff that evaluates the state of the tech and how it can advance. But like the stuff in issue 4, where it was kind of, if I remember right, almost a laundry list of chemicals, I was like, okay, this is too deep. And I'm actually a guy who likes the geoeconomics, because I'm an old school war gamer. So if you conquer a certain area, they gave you these resources. So I've done a lot of research in all of Europe and for like silver, gold, in quantities and all that kind of stuff. But this stuff was way past my level of interest. And I think
Sometimes I think perhaps we should spell out, manganese gives us specialty steel, tungsten gives us specialty steel. That's why this section's here.
well, I mean, the man over there, he said it's oftentimes for other authors to extrapolate what the timeline of when things are going to be able to be recreated. So
maybe leave those out of the magazines for our readers and find something.
put them on the website maybe.
Well, a lot of your readers, I assume, are going to eventually become authors. That seems to be the goal. So it seems to be that could be a resource. But
Yes, how about a
it's a
resource?
business decision for you guys to make whether it drives hits to the magazines or not. So
Yeah, but there was an article about the economics back in the Granville Gazette. Yeah, that was very, very interesting to me.
That was yours, wasn't it?
You probably, yeah.
It was writing about the Barbie Consortium.
Yeah.
I saw Gorg wrote something online about that, and it was recently, and I loved it. It was great.
Okay, I think what you're talking about is the slavery track?
Yes.
yeah.
Which you recently printed.
In one of the
Anthologies.
anthologies, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I worked up the slavery attractor basically to an extent because of what I learned about economics in researching first the sewing circle and then trip to Amsterdam and the Barbie Consortium. What happened was back in the day, when dinosaurs roamed the earth in 1632 with a new novel, there was a big argument on the bar about the time I was starting to write the Sewing Circle, about what they would use for money. And there was a big argument about that they were going to use a gold standard or a silver standard, and that they were going to go back to the dollars of the nickel hamburger. Right? And without any consideration of the fact that the nickel hamburger meant $1 a day minor. And telling the union that were the people with the guns that they were going to take a drop of 99% on their salary. Yeah, it wasn't going to happen. So I had to look up how money worked, and I ended up spending a lot of time finding out. I basically had to teach myself economics. And one of the things that what I ran across in doing that was that there are, economics are a chaotic system that seems like a statistical system if you're not looking closely enough. There are attractors in a chaotic system that pull the economy in a certain way. And that's what the slavery attractor was about, because it's one of those attractors, and it's too often grouped together with the innovation attractor. Both of them change things, but the slavery attractor leads to a different place. And that's how that one came about. And I looked at it, I had written it like 10, 15 years ago. And then I came back and I looked at it, and surprisingly little of it needed to be changed after 15 years. And so I put it in the thing. And I probably need to send it to you guys just so you'll have it.
Okay. Thanks. So we are looking for nonfiction, but I think we'll probably gravitate towards some shorter and more explanatory nonfic rather than the more really tech and resource brief stuff.
If I can make a comment, you were talking about the number of darker skinned people, right? Presumably Africans, but I'm not going to, it could have been some others. And the images, if you could find, we've all written research papers pretty much at some point in school. If you could write something relatively shorter that was talking about that would be a way to get started if you were interested in doing that, since it's an area.
Yeah, a little non-fiction essay or something like
A
that?
little nonfiction essay, and then put it up, and it's an area you're interested in. And when you write that and put it out there, if we get it to the point and we buy it and put it in, then it's something that's out there and it might spur other people writing other things as well. And that's getting you interested in when you're interested.
I just actually, something you said offered a thought. And you might want to consider writing white papers by downtimers in Grantham.
Yes.
I.e., you have a downtimer from the Netherlands write this paper up about the history and so forth, and basically have it be a white paper, a scholarly work by a black person from Holland or from Amsterdam.
That's a good thought.
Yeah,
There's a thought that arises out of what we just said. It sort of suggests itself that the Industrial Revolution and machinery would have some of the same effect as slavery, in that slavery makes influential people richer, but the Industrial Revolution makes everybody richer.
Yeah.
If these two things exist at the same time in the same society, how would they impact on each other?
Historically, the way it works is slavery tends to slow down technological advancement because of the cost of investing in the machines versus the cost of just buying somebody and putting them to work.
Manpower's cheap.
Yeah, it's actually short-term cheaper to buy the slave. And that actually, we've got lots of historical evidence of just that result.
Okay.
Of course, yeah, sorry.
All this stuff would make good nonfiction articles. But among the stuff that we are looking for, I think I want to specify a couple items that we're not looking for. One is that we're not looking for you to read all 14 million words or whatever it is now before you write a story. You don't have to do that. I want to make that really clear. You have to read 1632. Most of the time, it's probably a good idea to have read 1633 and 1634, the Baltic War, just so that you're conversant with the government of the area you're writing about. And then after that, you can get away with as much or as little as you want, depending on your topic. I told a couple of people this weekend that Eric Brown wanted to write some 1632 stuff instead of his usual kaiju novels. And he picked really small slices of the universe, uptime and downtime kids LARPing together. Required virtually no research, and he didn't have to read the whole canon to write some very entertaining stories. And then he wrote one about a Native American fighting a comet. And that has become a whole thing, and that's a very important
A
character.
Native American what?
An American Indian found a comic book in a dying Englishman's pack.
Oh, the Flash.
Oh, find the comic book.
Yep.
Yep.
And, oh, okay.
That was early
About a
on.
superhero.
It was. It was.
I don't
but,
remember.
Years ago.
Yeah, that was old.
Oh, yes, he invented a new religion.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, you really don't have to, I mean, the last short story I did, Indian Tea, which was in issue 1 of 1632 and Beyond. It's about two older grant builders that one of them owned a reaper, which is a machine that moves grain crops. And it's about how they go out and help some downtimers harvest their wheat. And you really only had to read 1632 to know everything you need to know to write that story. And then a little research. The only brief I got was, did a reaper come through the ring of fire? And it wasn't too hard to prove that that was very plausible.
Because there'd be one in the museum, if nothing else, right?
Exactly, that was part of my reasoning, was they go look at the museum,
And
they had
farmers keep
stuff like
old
that.
implements. Somebody's farm somewhere's got this
Yeah.
stuff somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, George Grant and I drove around the area. He was cataloging the farm machinery and so he's got all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff.
And we publish all kinds of stories, but we have noticed that the stories that seem to be most popular have three things going on. There's characters in there that are either fun or you can identify with or you're pulling for in some way. There might be some tech, and there's probably some action of some sort. That does not mean it has to be action adventure, but something has to happen. There are probably 50 stories, maybe more. The Fallow General Pattern of Meet Cute, the boy and girl are separately or together working on some tech, or perhaps one is the financier for the other, something along those lines. And then there's a tech advance and they live happily ever after. And I don't utterly object to you following this format, but there's a lot of other ways to do it. And if you rate some of the other ways to do it, that's fine. I have looked at, okay, now we're doing short stories, so this is not an entirely 100% valid comparison, but I did look at how the Fire Press books sold. And I think it is fair to characterize the ones that did the best as having all three characters, technology of some sort and action of some sort. So we are loosely looking for that, and I can totally be proven wrong where you have a story where there's characters in action and there's no tech advance. That's fine. If you do characters in tech and no action, it's hard to pull off. I talk to Bethanne all the time about if people do such and such, then they're choosing to play 1632 on the difficult side. And I strongly advocate doing a story first on the easy setting.
Don't be me.
Or as various writer help sites and podcasts and so on will tell you there's all these rules to writing, and you can learn how to be good enough to break all but one or two of them. But generally follow rules until you know why you're choosing to break them, type of thing. I don't object to just be totally blown away by an unconventional first story. If you can do that, awesome. I'm generally trying to throw out some advice to follow to make the first one easier.
My first story, Mrs. Flannery's Flowers, I posted it as sort of serialized for the magazine. People looked at the first section of the bar and said, they won't buy that, no one buys flash of light stories, you're not allowed to have something starting in 1631, and I was like, but I got the contract on it, wrong, right? And so, but what Bjorn's right, which is why I was like, don't be mean. It is the hard code, right? I actually did read the entirety of canon before I wrote it, which is why I could write an entire novel in 1631, which is because you have to be sure you're not going to impact canon, right? You have to know a fair amount to know you're not going to impact canon. You can write stories in 1631, but an entire novel isn't. So
Why
don't
don't
start
take
that.
a quick break and see if there's any questions, right?
Yeah, could you clarify what you mean by action? That can have a lot of meanings.
Okay. Action doesn't have to be overt physical conflict. There can be, the mystery of unraveling how we're going to build this, or the mystery of whether there's enough information left after the ring of fire to actually make this product or do this thing ever again, or whether we have to rediscover it from scratch. But generally, if your characters are facing some stakes and there's conflict, there's something that's preventing them from getting this done, rather than, okay, there's an article that we have never formally run in either the Gazette or in 1632 and beyond, and it's a series of reports from U.S. Steel that are just progress reports. We're researching this. A couple months later, we got it. We know how to do this now. We're starting production on this. And that's great for everybody to use as reference material. It is boring. We don't want to just put those reports in as reports, but if people are like, hey, I was on the group, we finally got this, that means we can go out, we can do this for grandma because we've got the thing we need to get that car repaired or the wheelchair working again or whatever.
I've got an example of a story from quite long ago in the Gazette. A woman is sulking because she's interested in birds, and she's drunk and moaning about losing birds, and she goes on a campaign to find a cardinal, and the most action thing in it is when somebody says, oh, there's the red bird, and she finds out it's been stuffed. She just goes into a fit. All the action as such is mostly in her head, except she takes expeditions to go look. But in a sense, it's very mild, but there's a lot of psychological action.
Right.
Well, Cassini rounds third, baseball game. That's action. It doesn't have to be fist in your face.
Right.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. Yes.
Stay tuned. He left us on a cliffhanger last time. Curious
The
about
last part is coming.
that. Yep.
It's in flesh. We're reading a good story.
So yeah, it doesn't have to be your characters go off to Russia or they're trying to get you.
Actually, we did that
People
so
want
that
to
we'd be out of the way.
There's a story I have that I talk about as an example if you don't have to know a lot. I like sewing. I have a bookcase and a half of books related to clothing and fashion, anything that I have found in related areas, right? And one of them is on clotheslines. I saw and I was like, how do you write an entire book on clotheslines? Turns out they didn't have them in that time period. So I wrote a book on how they get clotheslines into the universe. All I needed was to have read the first book and then this book on clotheslines. And some very basic knowledge. I have the soldiers, instead of like peeling potatoes when they're sitting there to keep them busy, I have the soldiers where there's buckets outside every door, and one of them has chunks of wood and the other one has finished clothes pegs, right? And if they're not doing anything else, the soldiers are, they're making the clothes pegs. And that's really all the story is. And there's more within it, but it doesn't require deep knowledge of anything, right? And it's a fun story. I think people enjoy it.
I wonder if each of you could maybe, because what I'm looking to hear is, where is there a hole that you would like to see filled? So I was wondering, maybe each of you could say, where do you feel like there's a hole, gaping or otherwise, that you would like to see filled? What's missing?
Bjorn, when you start. All right.
There are definitely holes all over the place. Something that we don't see is the teachers who've stayed in the schools, who haven't accepted the out-of-town jobs, who are now on their 6th or so year since they went to fire, and they're teaching, and they might be facing the same thing teachers today face. They might have too many kids in the class. They might be short of resources. They might have an evening class in addition to the normal teach during the day. But there are virtually no students, no stories about the teachers. There's some stuff about the students, and you can tell that the teachers are there in teacher classes in the background, but there are no teacher students. If you guys have anything that comes to mind, jump in while I'm thinking.
I think there's lots of older granddaughters, and so a couple of my stories have picked them up. Bethanne has picked some.
I love them. They're a hoot. You can make them do all kinds of things.
Yeah,
People can't do. They can get away with all kinds of stuff.
Wealth of life experience, and I don't think they've been tapped enough and put to use. We've got a shortage of grandbuilders and lots of things to do, and diplomacy that needs to be done, trade that needs to be done, and these guys should be a real resource, and I think they're underutilized. I see it.
And you could link them up with the Granville Research Center, which is also underutilized. And these are the folks that are collecting stuff, and I really believe that somewhere there are people that have just big sheets of butcher paper and are writing down. There's for example, we've got 14 personal care products that all list this thing as part of the makeup, this chemical as part of the makeup. Does anybody know what it is? From some high school, or yeah, here's the formula. Does anybody know how to make this? Not a clue. Think it might come from this. Does anybody know how to make that? And if you played a video game with a tech tree in it, there is definitely room for people who are not making a specific product, but who are out there curating those tech trees and going, wow, if we get this one, we solve pieces on like 6 different trees.
It's like information mining.
Yeah. If somebody wants to write a story about those folks and maybe go into Bowers and the other assisted living facilities and roping in people and saying, how was this done way back when? That would be awesome.
One of the things that I tucked into one of my stories was that early on someone went and they did interviews with the older citizens, and they got put to the side, and the Leahy-Gaina partnership was just starting, so they got put in a box and put to the side. And so they're just sitting there still in, 34, 35, and it's a lot of information from older people. But I was like, for me, what's easier is like, it's a world, right, for us at this point. It's a very real town in as much as something fictional can be real, because we have 200 people with all their different perspectives over 25 years. So like someone like Gorg, Virginia, Idaho, the story they're writing now is going to be different because they've changed in 20 years than what they were. So it's more than 200 different perspectives. What's easier for me is if you're interested in writing, you tell me what you're into, and I will pull something and tell you, like, okay, we can use that for a story. I was talking to someone and they were like, oh, I like women's self-defense and I like reading. And I'm like, all right, stop right there. Women's self-defense. We know there's self-defense classes. There isn't a lot that's been written about it. There is some that's in canon. There's not a lot, and I definitely don't remember any stories that were specifically in like you're in a self-defense class, this is how we're teaching it. The self-defense teachers are the focus and the class is the focus. I was talking to someone else and they were like, well, I like snowboarding, but that won't be relevant. And I'm like, wait, stop, no. That, don't assume it's not going to be, because we had ski troops in World War II, and there's no reason they couldn't have snowboarding troops, right? And or have emergency crews teams who have snowboards, or people have them that live on a mountain. There's no reason they couldn't exist in universe. Right? So for me, it's easier for you to come up and say, okay, these are the things I'm interested in, and I can help you find the story niche within our world, than to say, what do you need a story about? Yes, we need stories. We need tons of stories. You tell us what you're into, we'll help you find a story like you're interested in writing, like the non-fic.
I will tell you that there are still two challenges out there that haven't been answered. One of them is from Paula.
What?
One of them is from Paula Goodlett when she was editor of the Gazette. And that is for stories of 3,000 to 6,000 words using an uptimer that hasn't appeared in canon before. And that's it. You're wide open for what you want to do from there. The other challenge is from Walt Boyce, who is the next editor of the Medical Gazette. And that was for pick a small out-of-the-way town who's never seen an uptimer, never had an uptime artifact in their hands. But since the Ring of Fire, what's changed for them? So if you need a story prompt, those two are out there, and I would love to publish one or more stories in each of those categories. If you have an idea, something that it's your thing, we would certainly love to help you bring it into the 1632 universe. I think that if you haven't written before, your first story is a lot of work, and I would say that personally I believe your second story is the hardest one, because you know all that work you did on the first story, and now you've got a second idea and you've got to do the whole thing over again. And you've seen all these steps where you're stressing over this or the other thing. Somewhere in that second story, and I don't know if it's the same for everybody, but somewhere around that second story, I think that's probably when you start to get, oh, I could do this, but that's its own thing. Write that down over here, circle back later. And my guess is that by the time you get the second story accepted, that you're going to have ideas for 3, 4, and 5 over on the side of a page someplace. And fair warning, I don't think you'll ever catch up on that list. By the time you finish 3, I think you'll have 6 and 7 down. And again, I can't guarantee this works the same way for everybody, but I started numbering mine. And by the time option 7 got shot down, I was into higher numbers, and I've had, I believe it's 25 stories and 4 novels at this point. And the bright ideas that I have and I jot down are now getting numbers in the 80s. and some of those I'm never gonna get to. I think it works like that for a lot of folks.
Yep.
And that's how it should be. You want to pick and choose among your best ones.
And
Aside from the fact that I don't write them down.
I joke that my novels calve off new novels because by the time I start a novel, I tend to have 10,000 to 15,000 words on it already. Because it's the scenes that didn't fit in the last novel that I've put to the side. And then I have another one that has the scenes that just haven't fit anywhere at all yet, that are my orphan scenes. But yeah, like he's saying, they calve off and they start a new one.
But if you want to do this, you totally can.
I would also suggest that any new writer do what I did, work on a short piece the first time around.
Yes, please.
Because each draft takes as little of your time and energy as possible before you get a result back from it, some criticism back from it. They took me through my first story so fast that I cranked out 4 drafts in 4 days and it sold.
Nice.
One thing we haven't talked about, we have a website, author.1632magazine.com, a subdomain from our regular main e-commerce site, and there's a link to it from there. And we have a ton of resources for authors on that site. And we'll add author.1632magazine.com.
And it's like the 14 million or whatever number of words in the series. That's an old figure, by the way. You don't need to read the whole author website. That's there so you can go, what do they have on bicycles? Read the bicycle section, go off and do your thing.
And also, so there's some areas, there's dead horses. So there's things where they've been discussed quite a bit in the past. And you can learn what is there and that there's...
Yeah, and sometimes it's useful to read the dead horses discussions, and the dead horse list will say, yeah, we beat this to death a couple of different times. But there's always a chance that you have a new take on it. So sometimes you find yourself just typing the topic in at Nate's bar, and you can follow the discussions back to about 2012, when there was a catastrophic bar crash. And previous data was not necessarily recovered, although Virginia may remember it. Electronic lookup is not the only way to find stuff out. But yes, we really strongly advocate writing a short first before attempting the novel. And right now, Maine's doing the novels, and 1632 and Beyond is doing short stories, and we don't have that mid-level short novel venue that Ring of Fire Press provided. So we're not looking for novels, which is not keeping about 10 people from trying to write them anyway, right? But eventually Tony is going to get real with us on what can and can't happen with those. So I would say that's a bad break. Also, it's a lot of work if you find out that you're systematically doing something wrong. It's much easier to do something systematically wrong in a short story of a few thousand words and go back and fix that up and then go, okay, I got this now. And then later on, carry that expertise forward into a novel.
And also, we have something called the grid. You can't make up characters. I mean, like, hopefully I'll know this already, but you cannot make up an uptimer. And that's just a hard and fast rule. There is a grid. You can download it. You can see who has claimed characters. If someone has claimed them, you might be able to use them, but you have to ask. There's some that people have sort of in reserve, but just pick one that hasn't been claimed, and you have to follow what is written in there. I turned in the first version of my first short story, only to find out the character who I thought was in town in her house with her family lived outside of town and happened to be in town working at the pharmacy that afternoon. So then I had to go back and change things because no, I couldn't change what was in the grid. I had to change what was in the story because it was in the grid.
And just to briefly explain the grid, there are 3,551 uptimers. And Virginia used Census Department statistical modeling software to produce a fictional but realistic town that reflects the real-life town of Mannington, West Virginia, fairly closely. They are not identical. There's a point where Eric said, I need more Italians, and Virginia dialed up Italian on the software, and need more Italians. And so there's differences like that. If you ever go to Mannington, you'll know you're in Granville. You can go to the high school, you can go downtown to Market Street and so on. You're like, yep, this is the place.
And people introduce themselves and you're like, I know that name. Like the last name.
So,
Do you have a minimum length you'd like to see in a submission? Do you have a minimum length you'd like to see in a submission?
no. In the upcoming issue 5, we are running a story that is the first time we've done true flash fiction. There's a story back in the Gazette, the Dalai Lama's The Electric Buddha, that was 900 words. This story that's coming up is 59 words.
Oh, 59. Wow.
It is very small and self-contained. I don't know how many of those we're going to do, but if people write them, that's fine. I'm gonna give them the same consideration as any other stories. While we do permit stories of up to 17,500 words, and that basically rules out any sort of ongoing serial. But if you hand in a finished thing that's that long, we might decide, just due to space constraints in this issue, we're going to have to break this up into 2 or 3 parts, and that's sort of that's on us type of thing. I would shoot for the 3,000 to 8,000 range. But if you're like me and you write stories and you're like, man, I'm just consistently nailing 11K, that's your natural length. That's okay. People have different natural lengths. That's weird.
Just out of curiosity, would you take an intentional 2-part serial?
Oh yeah.
We have Cassini rounds 3rd right now in an issue, and the 5th part, the final part, is being considered. But I will note that the first 3 parts of that were in the Gazette, so we, technically speaking, have a lower word count in 2 parts.
But also, that's not a true serial. There are 5 related stories, each of which have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
That's true.
We have, in the past in the Gazette, there were serials that were ongoing where when part 1 was published, we didn't know how it ended. We're not doing that. There was later on there's another serial, I think it ran to 9 parts, where in the Gazette, where it wasn't necessarily all done when we bought part 1, but I worked with the author rather extensively, and I had a general idea of where things were going, and confidence that he was going to bring that in for a good landing at the end and all that. It's just that we're dealing with a smaller word count right now for 40,000 for an issue, and we can't have big long sagas at this point in time. I can't tell you what may or may not happen in the future. Don't know.
Do you have a question?
But if you have a favorite topic that's never been covered, and you want to talk to us later on, or you just want to, don't want to ask it in front of the group, I get it. as Chuck mentioned, you can send a story to submissions@1632beyond.com if you don't want to post it to the Gazette. I will tell you that in many cases, at some point in the process, I would go ahead and post it for you because I want those other writers' eyes on it so that somebody can go, hey, remember when this was touched on back 13 years ago and this point was established? And I'm like, nice save. That's why I need to put that on the slush so that there's a possibility of people can say this actually doesn't, connect to something that's gone before.
And the other thing, yeah, they do connect it, and sometimes like someone had a story and they had a character Johann who was the Golden Arches, and I had written a story and I had Johann as the Golden Arches, and we concluded it was the same Johann. And so we gave him a last name and a birth year. And so if we had Johann, and sometimes you'll find ways you and another author can combine stories and work them together. But I think we're about out of time.
Yep, we are just about. All right, any final remarks?
I said, just tell us what you're interested in, talk to us, we'll help you find the stories.
Thanks very much.
I know you need to.
I just need to
Also, we have swag. Please come up and take stuff.
I need to get address.
Submission.